The morning had no color. It hung over the city like a faded photograph. Gray sky, gray streets, gray faces moving too fast to notice anything beyond themselves. The air carried a sharp chill, the kind that slipped through fabric and settled quietly into bones. People rushed along cracked sidewalks, collars turned up, eyes down, as if the world around them were something to endure rather than see. Among them walked Keanu Reeves. But no one noticed. There were no cameras trailing him, no whispers rising in recognition. He had dressed for invisibility. Simple dark jacket, worn boots, nothing that invited a second glance. Even his posture carried a deliberate softness, as if he were trying to take up less space in a world already too crowded. He preferred it this way. Fame had taught him many things, but perhaps the most important was how loud it could become, how it could drown out the quieter truths of life. And lately, it was those quieter truths he found himself searching for. He moved slowly, hands tucked into his pockets, his breath faint in the cold air. Around him, the city pulsed with urgency. Car horns echoed. A vendor shouted half-heartedly from a corner stand. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, then disappeared into silence. But what caught his attention wasn't the noise. It was what existed beneath it. A man sitting against a wall, head bowed, a paper cup resting near his feet. People stepped around him without looking, their movements instinctive, almost practiced. A woman struggled to carry heavy bags, her face tight with exhaustion, while others brushed past her as though she were invisible. A young worker leaned against a bus stop pole, eyes hollow, scrolling endlessly on a cracked phone screen. Keanu's gaze lingered on each of them, not in passing, but with quiet recognition. He knew something about being overlooked, not in the same way, not with the same consequences, but in the deeper human sense. He had known loss. He had known silence. He had walked through moments where the world didn't pause, didn't care, didn't even notice. And maybe that was why he couldn't stop noticing now. His steps slowed further. There was a weight in his chest, not heavy, not overwhelming, but persistent. A question without words. A feeling that somewhere, in all of this motion and indifference, something real was being missed. Something important. He exhaled slowly, his breath clouding the cold air, and continued forward. Then, without warning, something shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just there, a presence. His eyes moved, almost on their own, toward the edge of the sidewalk near a broken curb. And that's when he saw him. A boy. Small. Still. Sitting on an old wooden crate that looked like it had been dragged there long ago and forgotten. His clothes were thin, worn at the edges, not nearly enough for the cold that pressed into everything. His hands were tucked into his sleeves, his shoulders slightly hunched, not in defeat, but in quiet endurance. He wasn't asking for anything. That was the first thing Keanu noticed. No outstretched hand. No desperate call for attention. Just a silent existence, as if he had learned early that the world rarely responded anyway. People passed him. Again and again, a man nearly bumped into him, muttered something under his breath, and kept walking. A group of teenagers laughed loudly as they walked by, their voices cutting through the air, but not one of them glanced down. Even a woman who slowed for a moment seemed to reconsider, then turned away, her pace quickening. The boy didn't react. He simply watched, and then he smiled, not at anyone in particular, not in expectation. Just a small, genuine smile that appeared for a brief second, like a flicker of warmth in a place that had none. Keanu stopped. It was subtle, just a fraction of a pause in his step, but it felt louder than anything else in that moment. Their eyes met. For a second, the noise of the city seemed to pull back, like a tide retreating from the shore. The cold, the movement, the endless rhythm of passing strangers, all of it faded into the background. There was only that look. The boy didn't seem surprised, didn't seem curious. He simply held the gaze, calm and steady, as though he had nothing to prove and nothing to ask. And in that brief connection, something stirred deep within Keanu, something uncomfortable, something real. But just as quickly as it came, it slipped. Because the world rushed back in, a car honked loudly. Someone brushed past his shoulder. The moment fractured under the weight of everything else demanding attention. And Keanu kept walking. One step, then another. His jaw tightened slightly, his gaze shifting forward again, as if trying to convince himself that movement was easier than stillness, easier than whatever that moment had begun to uncover. But even as he moved away, something lingered. Not guilt, not regret, just a quiet, persistent pull. Behind him, the boy remained where he was, small, still and unseen. By the world once more, and ahead of him, Keanu walked on, carrying something he couldn't yet name. The steps didn't feel right. Keanu Reeves had walked only a few meters, but something inside him resisted every inch forward. The noise of the city returned, yet it sounded distant now, muffled, like he was hearing it from underwater, that smile. It stayed with him, not loud, not desperate, just quietly human. He slowed, then stopped. For a moment, he stood there, caught between instinct and something deeper. Most people would have kept going. In fact, he had kept going. But now it felt like a mistake his body refused to accept. He exhaled slowly, eyes closing for a brief second. Then he turned. The boy was still there, same position, same stillness, like time hadn't moved for him at all. A cold gust of wind passed, and the boy pulled his sleeves tighter, trying to hold on to whatever warmth he could. Keanu walked back. This time, there was no hesitation, no overthinking, just quiet intention. When he reached him, he didn't speak immediately. He simply stood there for a second, taking in the small details. The cracked crate, the worn shoes, the way the boy's fingers trembled slightly in the cold. Then gently, he sat down beside him, not above, not in front, beside. "Cold morning," he said softly. The boy looked up, studying him. Not with excitement, but with a kind of calm curiosity. "I'm used to it," the boy replied. That answer hit harder than it should have. Keanu gave a faint nod, his eyes drifting briefly toward the empty street ahead. Then back to the boy, and for the first time that morning, he didn't feel like walking away anymore. Keanu Reeves didn't rush the silence. It settled between them like the cold air, sharp, honest, impossible to ignore. The boy kept his gaze steady, not intimidated, not impressed. Just present. Keanu studied him more closely now. The thin jacket, the worn sleeves pulled over small hands, the quiet strength in the way he sat, as if he had learned long ago that comfort wasn't something the world freely gave. "You waiting? For someone?" Keanu asked gently. The boy shook his head. "No, people don't usually come back." There was no bitterness in his voice, just truth. Keanu swallowed slightly, the words landing deeper than expected. For a moment, he didn't know how to respond. So instead, he reached up, removed his hat, and turned it slowly in his hands. Then, without making it a big moment, without turning it into charity or attention, he placed it softly on the boy's head. The boy froze. Not because of the warmth, but because of what it meant. The boy's fingers rose slowly, touching the edge of the hat as if it might disappear. Keanu Reeves watched quietly, unsure why his chest suddenly felt tight. "My father had one like this," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu's breath caught. "He used to say, 'A good man doesn't keep warmth to himself.'" The words didn't just land, they echoed. For a moment, Keanu couldn't speak. Something old, something buried, stirred inside him, like a memory trying to surface. The boy looked up again, eyes searching his face. "You remind me of him." And just like that, Keanu had no words left. For a while, neither of them spoke. Keanu Reeves let the silence breathe, sitting there as the city blurred past like it didn't matter anymore. The boy adjusted the hat slightly, as if testing whether it truly belonged to him now. Then, almost shyly, the boy pulled something. From his side, a folded, worn piece of paper. "I draw sometimes," he said. Keanu leaned in a little as the boy carefully opened it. Inside was a rough sketch, but not careless. It was detailed in the way only memory can be. A man stood in the drawing, offering something to another person, and on his head, a hat. Keanu's eyes lingered on it longer than expected. Something about it felt familiar. Not just the shape, not just the gesture, but the feeling behind it. He frowned slightly, trying to place it. But the answer stayed just out of reach, and for the first time since sitting down, a quiet thought crossed his mind. This moment wasn't random, part 6 unique and short. The wind shifted, colder now, but neither of them moved. Keanu Reeves kept his eyes on the drawing, something inside him tightening with every second. It wasn't just a sketch, it felt like a memory he hadn't realized he carried. "That's him," the boy said softly. "My father." Keanu looked up. "He used to help people, even when we had nothing." The boy traced the outline of the figure. "He told me one man changed his life, a stranger, said he didn't even know his name." Keanu's heartbeat slowed, then deepened. "What did he do?" he asked quietly. The boy smiled faintly. "He gave him his hat, on a day just like this." Silence fell, not empty, heavy, and in that moment, Keanu felt the past reach out and touch the present. Keanu Reeves felt it before he understood it. A quiet shift, a memory loosening from somewhere deep. Cold air, another street, another day he barely remembered, because at the time it hadn't felt important. "I think I found him because of that," the boy continued, eyes still on the drawing. "My father said that moment changed everything, made him believe people still cared." Keanu's throat tightened. Fragments clicked into place. A man, tired, standing alone. And without thinking, Keanu had taken off his hat and handed it over, then walked away, never looking back. He had forgotten, but the man hadn't. Keanu looked at the boy, really looked this time, and something inside him stilled completely. "That man," he said softly, almost unsure of his own voice. The boy met his eyes. "I've been waiting to meet someone like him again." And just like that, Keanu realized he already had. Part 8. Unique and short for a moment, the world seemed to fall completely silent. Keanu Reeves couldn't move, couldn't speak. The weight of it all pressed into him, not heavy in pain, but overwhelming in meaning. A single forgotten moment from his past had lived on in someone else's entire life. The boy adjusted the hat again, a small smile forming. "He said kindness doesn't disappear," he murmured. "It just finds its way back." Keanu's eyes softened, but no words came, because none were enough. Instead, he reached out, not grand, not dramatic, and gently placed his hand over the boy's shoulder. This time, he didn't stand up. This time, he didn't walk away. As people continued to pass without noticing, the two of them sat there. No longer strangers, no longer separate stories. And in that quiet corner of a cold, gray city, Keanu finally understood. Some of the smallest things we give away are the ones that return and change everything.